welcome to Saving Europe. I'm the novelist and historian Henry Viner Brooks, and in this series we're following the lives and travels of two of history's unsung heroes. The decisive leadership shown by the 6th century monk Columbanus and the 20th century statesman Robert Schuman helped rescue Western civilization in two very different dark ages. So, joined by my two sons, I'm on a 4,000-mile, 12-country post-Brexit odyssey to find out if these men and these dark ages can teach us anything for today. In this episode, we'll follow Columbanus and his party to Lake Constance. We're looking for evidence of their time here and exploring their legacy. Starting in Brigantium, we'll move west around the lake to a UNESCO World Heritage Island called Reichenau. And there, we will not only discover the labours of past heroes, but also sense their challenge across time to us.
We want to taste their victories, their successes and their struggles. If by any means we are to make a kind of impact in our own day, which is comparable.
If you're finding this content helpful, then please return the favour by liking this video, subscribing to the channel and perhaps even sharing it with a friend. And also do check out the new book which accompanies this series. Thanks for watching.
A bit of a day off for the boys. They've gone cycling. I've driven down here to Brigantium, and just here the church of St. Columban. Perfect. Yeah, so the guys have gone off cycling. In fact, they're probably around here somewhere on the front now. We've agreed to meet in about 8 hours' time, so I hope they have a nice day. Give them plenty of money, and they've earned it. They've done really well. We've basically been filming for 20 days on the no days off, and it's been pretty intense on occasion. So I hope they have a good time. I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to start here. Well, the fine sculptures of Columbanus denouncing Theodoric, I suppose. Here's a picture of them coming across from Abbey to Brigantium. Notice the holy books. This feels like entering the dwarf kingdom of the Lonely Mountain. These great doors. It's got great stained glass. Hello. I'm going to go and ask them about Gallus, because I'm still struggling to find St. Gall's rock, Gallerstein, but maybe they will know. So I'm going to go and ask, but I won't film. So Sister's been very kind to show me exactly where the old chapel is. We've pinpointed it using Google Maps. And they have a reliquary of Columbanus here.
Live Columbanus.
Yes. Yeah. How old is this?
35 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. There.
Okay, and it is, yeah, I can see.
Okay.
See, yeah. It is a relic of St. Columban. And what part of his body? What is it?
Yeah.
Bit of, you don't
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so no one knows, so that. There you go.
I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. And there is the security.
Yeah.
Alarm.
Oh, it is alarmed. Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
God bless you.
On church.
Up here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's amazing actually, because I just wasn't even thinking of coming here. What it goes to show is that Google's like so wonderful. You've come to rely on it as if it's all knowledge, but actually, sometimes it is absolutely worse than useless, because it's just some bits of knowledge are not recorded and hidden, but they are here locally. So I've been looking for this old chapel that was written about by Ophir in his book. and that dear nun there, she told me all about it. Anyway, let's go up and see if we can find this St. Gall's Chapel. So this is kind of an older church, but I believe, if we've got it right, to the side of this, if that nun was correct, is the remains of the old capella of Gaul. So let's go and see. She said it was under here. She said it was locked. So this is kind of below the main church. So maybe we could find someone who would let us see inside. Oh yeah, I can see very old frescoes. So let's see if we can talk our way in there. I need to find out how important that is, if that is the case. Yeah, I've got it once again. We've got the Baroque. Different frescoes of Hieronymus, Augustine, Ambrose. So, the bulk of this is Baroque site, Baroque. But we're walking now across the chancel into the choir. This area under us now is Roman in the dark black. The Romanesque is the dotty hatch. So there was basically a small Romanesque church, kind of incorporating this part of the altar area and the crossing. But what's tantalising is nothing is mentioned here of the little chapel, which is effectively below our feet. Here, a set of steps or something. It didn't look like there was another staircase going to it. But yeah, I might just see if there's anyone. I can see some open doors here to see if there's anyone to ask, maybe, if we could get into the downstairs. This lady who's cleaning, I think, and she says that she's going to get the key, so yes. So that's a bit of good news. We'll follow her down under the church to the very oldest part. That's not even mentioned on this. That's what's extraordinary. Okay, so this is it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So Swabian.
Yeah. So we've got, looking at a loaf of bread, there's the bed. So this is Gallus.
Presiden Birga itu Udai Presiden.
Yeah, we're praying.
Yeah.
So who is this?
Saya terasa.
Is Columbanus here?
Yeah.
These look later. They look more 15th century to me.
So this is altar.
Yeah, altar.
Ja, das ist sehr interessante Geschichte.
This is great. This is great, and people have been inscribing things in very interesting Gothic script. I cannot read it. 1505. Associations with Gaul for 1,000 years on this rock, and which has now become the big Romanesque and the Baroque church. And this was the original little chapel of St. Gall on the rock. And this symbol here that'll be a shell for a pilgrim. I have a feeling this is the rock where Gall preached, the Gallerstein, where Gall first preached in their own language to the peoples of this area. He really comes out of Jonah's work because we don't hear much about him until now. And here in Arbon, he is preaching. Thank you very much. So yeah, God bless, thank you. God bless Croatia. My Croatian guide. That was great. So that's amazing. And you can really see from here why it is called Gallux Rock, because there's it drops steeply down So we're built right on the cusp of a hill. Now it all makes sense, all the reading I've done up until now. So, and if I go around the edge of the church here, I'm standing on a wall and it drops down, you know, 20 feet, 30 feet. So yeah, that makes sense. So it's called St. Gall's Rock. And yeah, it's a really kind of highly defended place. And no wonder there were Roman remains here. And I think this was actually a pagan site that they just co-opted, as was their want. Mehrerau, Abbey, Kloster. In truth, I don't know what I'm going to find here. So the links between Columbanus and here are kind of tenuous, really. There were frescoes of him here a couple of 100 years ago before the ravages of time. Still looks like an impressive place. Let's go and have a weenie look. According to my notes, this was a Benedictine foundation that fell into disuse during the period called the secularization. And it was Franz Joseph who allowed a group of Cistercians to recolonize. Holy moly. Play more down. I like when people have a go. I think if we want a new expression of the Romanesque, perhaps we've found it. The clear story, this upper area for light, reimagined. This is a reasonably cheap way to build as well, of course. And at the end, the apse, which originally is sort of dates back to the time of when Christians took the basilicas, the judgment halls where the judge would sit, and then that became what everyone knows now as a noticeable feature of these Christian churches. I think this works in the sense that it kind of gives you a feeling of the austerity, the grandeur, I mean, kind of that, these monolithic spaces and these kind of what would be rose windows. This look like great windows up into heaven. So yeah, it does all very well. This is really not what I was expecting. I know that there is a cloister here that used to have frescoes of Columbanus. So I just need to somehow get through to the cloister. So the news is basically Father Henrik, he just said there is nothing to see. Yeah, he just said it's difficult just to open up the place, which I quite understand. I wrote to everyone else an email, but I didn't think of emailing here. Still, we have been, and now we must go to Reichenau. And the reason we're going to Reichenau is this, quite simply. If you want to see some old churches that have not been kitsched up in Baroque, then that is the place to go.
I think our time is running out. My spiral be brave for me, pull close, let's kneel, hold my hand.
Very excited to be back on Reichenau. I've not been here for 3 years, and I've only been here once. It was on a day off at the end of a very long 1 month trip, finishing off a book over the lake. We stayed at a house called Überlingen. And yeah, we came here on the last day of the holiday. And when we discovered some of the history of this place, it really sparked some new thoughts in me. We're entering an island which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The founder, Permin, they lived under an Irish rule. Became a very, very important monastery. The abbots here, very important men in the Carolingian era. One of them educated Charlemagne's son, all sorts of things, and it became a great place for music, art, literature and science. But the churches here too are old, they've been left. I mean, look at that stunning church. We're going to head straight to the museum and hopefully get a kind of feel for the old times before so much of the success was seen. At that point, everybody moves in, but it's the pioneers we want to see. We want to taste their victories, their successes and their struggles. If by any means we are to make a kind of impact in our own day, which is comparable. And this is sort of quite a special place. Coming to this museum here, actually, one of the main reasons, or one of the contributory reasons anyway, that I ended up writing the book about Columbanus. But I saw a little comic book here, and in the comic book I saw about these Irish guys and the foundation of Gorse Monastery. So I'm going to go inside, see if I can find it, and then find some information that would help bring alive that period of history for us. So let's get our bearings. First of all, that's Arbonne there. So Columbanus arrives there and goes up to Brigantium. There's Mehrerau. But down here, this island, on the outflow, the Rhine outflows here, and just in this kind of eddy, there's this beautiful island, which today is used for growing things. Can you see this nice picture here of the island? Very traditional kind of story here, like Patrick Permin, who's the chap who founds the monastery. He chases, well, you can see him here, chasing out the snakes. Kind of a sign that, you know, evil's been vanquished. It's rather done in the style of A.A. Milne. This picture of Reichenau is rather nice. Boats tethered. That's the main monastery. Looks like someone's got a little chateau there of some sort. And this is the monastery actually where this amazing plan came from, which is the first architectural plan. Here are these two towers at the end, and this ambulatory inside the apse of the church. And here's the cloister. And it's a sort of schematic or an infographic, if you like, of the components, the essential components that you would need if you were going to establish a monastic city, which of course is a civilization as a kernel. And look, here's a kind of 3D version. So provided you've got this, you've got the blueprint. And here are like some of the manuscripts we saw yesterday. Look at this with the vellum, where you have I saw that. I was very surprised to see in some of the vellum manuscripts in the St. Gallen Library holes in it, perhaps where there was a blemish in the vellum. But of course you can't just chuck it away. You've got to use what you can, and they literally wrote round it. Here are some of the guys at work. A transfer of information, the most important thing that they could have done. You know, some scholars say that manuscript copying came within a whisker in the 6th and 7th centuries. Well, it's not quite true. What happened was they reused the palimpsest. They scraped the ink off original vellum, because vellum, you know, how many cattle? The Amiata Bible probably, was 2,000 hides. So you don't just make a book willy-nilly. It's a serious investment. So what had happened was, throughout that period, we need a book. In the Carolingian period, we want to rewrite a nice history, replacing Charlemagne, his royal history. Well, we'll just get an older history and we will and we copy it onto an older vellum. And palimpsest, that was how they did it. This dates from the time of Charles the Great. What can we tell? Well, for one thing, we can see this knotwork, which, you could say is Germanic, or could you say this is Irish, particularly some of this. It's quite a soft stone. It's a good survival. We'll go in this church here. This is the Abbey here, and we'll go in there in a minute. And this is the main Munster Abbey complex. I love this decoration, the kind of honesty of the polychrome banding of sandstone. Okay, it's been nice and quiet. It's a heavy door. These beautiful arches up there. Here are some of the tombs of some of the abbots.
The abbots here were even sent on diplomatic missions to Constantinople by Charlemagne. One was Arch-Chancellor of a pan-European empire, another trained the emperor's sons. But that is not what impresses or moves me. What impresses and humbles me as I walk on these stones is to think of the gifted men and women who worked and worshipped here for over 1,000 years. During the Carolingian Renaissance, and for centuries afterwards, these columns and cloisters supported one of the great culture-shaping engines of Western Europe. It was the sort of place where a young tearaway called Vetti, who sounds a lot like Columbanus in his younger years, could be trained up and one day be acknowledged as the intellectual's intellectual. His vision of Vetti is the forerunner of Dante's Commedia, and thus the fountainhead of all fantasy genres. Another monk, originally taught by the Irish, was Nocta the Stammerer, who became a prodigious historian and psalmist. And then there's Walafrid Strabo, called the Squinter, who produced literary works in multiple genres from the age of 18, including a biography of the Iona monk Blathmag. He also wrote down his prophetic dreams, published poems on botany and lengthy works of theology. Another, and my favourite, is Herman the Lame, a man so physically disabled that he could hardly speak or even get dressed without help, and yet so prodigious in the arts and sciences that he became known as the marvel of Europe. At the age of 7, his parents left him with the monks as they could no longer look after him. And yet by the age of 20, Herman was fluent in several languages, including Arabic and Greek. He wrote treatises on mathematics, on theology, on geometry, astronomy, and even one on the science of music. He was a renowned poet and musical composer, and many of his hymns were written in later life when he became blind. In the 10th and 11th centuries, this school, this scriptorium and workshops here claimed to be the most prolific producer of lavish manuscripts in Europe. But it was not to last. The lands were appropriated by the state during the 18th century secularization. The monks finally sent packing by Napoleon in 1803, and the library was broken up.
I must say this is very much a simplicity taken to very great heights. But what I love and I always remember is these arches at the end. I mean, I'm sure that you see them all over the place. Siena is a notable example. If we look up to the Clerestory, there's some. I make so much about this, but man is allowed to have his little foibles, but that seems to take me back to a completely different time in history. And there is one other church that I want to show you on this tour, and it is at the far end of the island, but the frescoes there are very early and well worth going to see. So let's saddle up and ride out. Extraordinary church of St. Peter and Paul, and you know, I've spoken about this because of the 11th century frescoes, which are precious, to give you an idea of what we lose. And we have seen this all through our journey. We started at Llangcarfen in Wales, where the frescoes had been revealed, but see how they can be damaged. Here is a picture of Christ and the cross, and so probably in this atrium going into the church, there was the cycles from the Gospels, now lost. But what remains is extremely precious. The frescoes themselves depict various saints, the apostles, Christ sitting in judgment in a mandorla, this kind of ellipse shape. And lovely to see that the artist has tried to recreate the wheels within wheels that Ezekiel sees in a revelation about the angels that support the throne of God. I've often wondered how an artist would do it today with all of CGI, and that's how they did it there. So, yeah, the way they describe Reichenau is, they call it the cradle of Western culture, which is a very provocative way to describe any place. And it sounds like a very grand claim as well. And maybe it is. There were a lot of people about the great work. Some people like to claim for Columbanus too much, or for the Irish too much. And for someone like me, it is easy to want to exaggerate. It's in my nature. I think I have a bit of Irish and the rest is Italian. Nevertheless, makes one incredibly grateful that there were people going about the world doing their best under trying circumstances, with illness, with fatigue. It is a beautiful sight. I do hope you will make the effort to come here.
The monastic island of Reichenau, along with perhaps two other continental monasteries, demonstrate how Columbanus and the Irish would speed the recovery of Western civilization after the decline and fall of Rome in the preceding centuries. For me, it's a reminder of the fragility of Western culture, and also what that culture is, or rather should be, at its very core. But before we followed Columbanus over the Alps to Lombardy, I took some time that evening to visit Arbon at the other end of the lake. It was here that Columbanus first arrived, and it was also here that Columbanus would take leave of his Amanchara, his soul friend, for the very last time. At Arbon I wanted to mull over the painful circumstances of Columbanus' departure from the area, but also highlight how even this, in the light of history, turned out for the good of his mission and legacy. And so it will be this, and a visit to the great Abbey of Dissentis at the foot of the Alps, that will form the grist of our next episode on Saving Europe.
Remember also that this journey was part of the research for a book which uses the lives of Columbanus and Schuman
to explore the unlikely arrival, survival, victory and atrophy of European civilization.
Do follow the links below to find out more.
Please let us know what you thought of this episode, what you liked, what you didn't, what was new to you. Just start a conversation below in the comments section. And of course, if you found the content helpful, then we're pretty sure you're going to like this next one suggested here. But also while you're there, don't forget to help us by subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.